Okay, folks. So welcome back, and welcome back, long-term friend of the show, Peter Samsonov. And you have got a new book out, which we're very excited about. Can you tell the audience what you've got?
Absolutely. So my latest book is called Hetzer versus SU-76, Hungary 1945, and it focuses on the encounter between these two vehicles at the Battle of Lake Balaton in Hungary in March of 1945.
Excellent. Now, it was funny when I saw you had this book out. I thought I had never actually thought about SU-76 and Hetzer in a direct matchup, but considering they're both roughly 10-ton vehicles, they were in roughly the same places and fighting. Of course, it's actually quite a natural thing when you think about it. How did you come to make this matchup?
Um, it was interesting. I mean, I started working backwards. I wanted to write about Lake Balaton, and then the question is, well, what do I? Because the Osprey dual format's fairly rigid, right? They've refined it over the course of decades, and it's a formula that works. And you need two vehicles that face off against each other. And the SU-76, I wanted to write about that because it's really the T-34, yes, it's an important vehicle. It's not the only important vehicle, right? Everyone wants to talk about the T-34. No one wants to talk about the poor little Su-76. Getting a bit ahead of myself, but the Su-76 at Lake Balaton represented 1/4 of the armor of the Third Belarusian Front. So it wasn't really like a sideshow. It was one of the major kind of participants in the battle. And then the
Yeah, I mean, it
question.
was. Sorry, I mean it was the second most produced armored fighting vehicle of the war, and essentially took over the light tank role in the Soviet army. So yeah, I mean, and to me, it kind of blew my mind. I saw it going around the track at Oz Armor Fest, and I thought I should know more about this vehicle. And then they were saying it's the second most produced Soviet vehicle of the war. And I was like, this is actually much more important than and you know, I don't know everything about tanks, but I'm been on this journey a while, and to be surprised by it says we're missing. There's a hole in the knowledge there.
Yep, there's a lot to find out. There's a lot of things that you don't really think about when it comes to these vehicles, especially some of the ones that have missed out from the spotlight. But yeah, you did mention that they're about equal weight. The chassis that both tanks or vehicles are based on. So the T-70 that the Su-76 is based on weighs about 9.5 tons, depending on the variant. The Panzer 38T that the Hetzer evolved from, it weighs something like 300 kilos more. So they were almost exactly the same in terms of weight. They were both based on these light tanks that went out of production in 1942. As it very quickly turned out on the Eastern Front that the light tank, there's no room for light tanks anymore. So the Germans ended production of the Panzer II and the Panzer 38T to focus on using the chassis and self-propelled guns. The Soviets hung on a bit longer. They produced the T-70, they produced the T-80, a couple of dozen T-80s, which was essentially a T-70 with a two-man turret, but eventually reached the same conclusion: is we might as well take the components that we've tested and use them to make a self-propelled gun. Now, what they wanted in a self-propelled gun was vastly different, and I do kind of explore the why they went in different directions and what they ended up with. Um, that being the Hetzer is a tank destroyer and the Su-76M is not. It's essentially a mechanized ZIS-2 divisional field artillery piece, excuse me. And but interestingly enough, both of these vehicles ended up fighting in the role of the other. So at Lake Balaton, the unit with the most Hetzers was actually a Hungarian assault artillery regiment. So the Hetzers were used as assault guns in support of infantry rather than as tank destroyers. And then on the Soviet side, the Su-76 was very often used as a tank destroyer. You weren't supposed to do it that way. It was not great at the role, but the tactics manual for the Su-76 straight up said if tanks appear on the battlefield, your number one goal, no matter what your other orders were, is to defeat those tanks. Once you've destroyed them or driven them away, then you can resume all your other duties. But your tanks become your first priority if they show up on the battlefield. And the 76 millimeter gun was not the most powerful gun when it came to anti-tank rolls, but it could penetrate the front armor of any German medium tank and the side armor of any German tank, especially when using the subcaliber ammunition that was issued specifically for this purpose. So the SU-76, yeah, it's kind of a 10-ton light self-propelled gun with bulletproof armor, but it can really punch above its weight when it comes to fighting enemy tanks.
Yeah, it's interesting the comparison between the two tanks, and when you put them head to head, the Hetzer's basically it's fairly similar gun, but and weight and armor, but the visibility between the two of them and the roles that they were playing, one being an ambush tank destroyer, and the other one being with its low profile and limited traverse, and the other being a support, essentially divisional artillery / infantry support vehicle, performing the role of a light tank, and with much greater visibility for the commander being able to just stick his head up out of the fighting compartment in the rear. It'd be a strange old fight between the two of the differences of who can see what and who can get the first shots off accurately.
Oh, absolutely. I had the pleasure of examining the fighting compartments of not one but two Hetzers. One was at the Panzermuseum Münster, and one was at the Canadian Tank Museum here in Oshawa. And it's an experience. Even without a full load of ammunition, full load of equipment, without anybody else inside, it is quite cramped. It's very difficult to move around. And you can really see it's one thing to just say, "Oh, it's the gun loads from the left, but from the right, but the loader sits on the left." It's a completely different thing
the
to.
loader having to reach over the gun to put the rounds in, and the
Oh yeah,
commander sitting at the back with no hatch. Well, sorry, either has to open the rear hatch to face backwards or stick his head right out because there's no cupola.
yeah. Meanwhile, the commander is reaching back over the loader to get to the radio because the radio is on the left side of the hull, and the commander sits on the right. So it's this. I don't know. There's a theory that Alexei Surin designed it badly on purpose. And, well, the fact that the Soviets, when they occupied Czechoslovakia and you had Dankiewicz combing through the ranks for Nazi collaborators, the fact that the guy who designed these armored vehicles for Germany walked away scot-free suggests that, maybe he was able to make that argument saying that I made these tanks really bad on purpose, let me live.
Brilliant.
That's a fascinating argument. That'll really annoy the Hetzer fans to hear that one. But I mean, the Hetzer, it looks like a coffin inside. The armor isn't thick enough to offer a lot of protection, just get in everyone's way. In a lot of ways, in a straight matchup, you look at the SU-76, which it looks more purpose-built to be a gun platform than the Hetzer, which is, a coffin with a gun sticking out the front.
I do write quite a bit in defense of the Hetzer, right? It's not a one-sided comparison. The Hetzer obviously has the gun and the armor. It has quite formidable armor in the front, so almost as much as the much heavier Jagdpanzer IV. Same gun, of course, in a much lighter chassis. So that being able to do that at all, forgetting how much you had to sacrifice for it, is an achievement of engineering. That's a considerable amount of firepower to put in a little package. But now, you're right, is you have to make it as small as possible, because if you make it a couple of inches wider, give a little bit more leg room, that means it's bigger, that means it's heavier, that means you have to cover a larger volume with armor, and that drives the weight up, and that drives the reliability down, because the engine that was supposed to go into the Hetzer never did. They used an old engine that they had in production, which was weaker, less reliable, and, well, you got what you got. if the most important thing was armor and firepower, then you got it. But turns out that there's a lot more that goes into designing a armor fighting vehicle than just putting the biggest gun and the thickest armor that you can find.
Now, one of the reasons sorry, Rob, go.
Yeah, getting back to the story about the Hetzer designer getting let go. Now, the poor old engine designer for the SU-76M being lauded first and then sent to the front because it didn't work as well, and then trying to bring him back before he got killed when not quite making it. I'm sorry, don't have my notes in front of me to remember his name, but the story of being sent to the front because the engines weren't working well, and then being by Stalin, and then being recalled by Stalin because he needed somebody to be able to fix it and get it going again. It seems very similar stories, I guess. Who's involved.
I do bring this story up a lot because the stereotype is the moment anything goes wrong at all, Stalin sends a goon to shoot you in the back, and you can never ever admit to any mistake ever because that's how you get killed. In this case, the story proves pretty much the opposite. So Ginsburg, very famous tank designer, he was among the first engineers who specifically studied to be a tank designer in the USSR. So in the 1920s, associated with lots of very high profile projects, he was basically a rock star, and he had the ego of a rock star. So the T-60 tank used a truck engine. It was fine for a 6-ton tank. The T-70 weighing half again that much, obviously you can't just put the same engine in it. So they did the next best thing and put the same engine in it twice. When Ginsburg started making his first self-propelled gun chassis, it was still based on T-60 components. So he did a really simple thing, which, dates back all the way to the Whippet of the First World War, where if you have two engines, why not have two gearboxes? One gearbox per engine. On the Whippet, they weren't synchronized. On the T-60 chassis, they were synchronized. And it kind of worked well enough for the concept to cement itself and kind of propagate down to the new chassis built on T-70 components, which eventually made the SU-76. Now, the problem was that something that worked on a 6-ton tank doesn't necessarily work on a 9-ton tank, and this was one example. The design that he built had a fatal weakness in the transmission. Unfortunately, he refused to admit this was the case. And even as people at the factory, even other people in his design bureau would suggest that, hey, maybe there's something wrong with what we're building, he would say, no, it's got to be someone else's fault. He blamed this factory, which built the gearboxes. They said, we're putting the exact same gearboxes into trucks, and they work fine in our trucks. He was blaming the army, and then the army said, well, we're using these same gearboxes on the T-70 and on the trucks, and they work fine. So it was kind of a finger-pointing situation. In the meantime, his designers were actually working in secret from their own boss to fix this problem. And when Stalin caught wind of it, he was naturally furious. Ginsburg deservedly caught the fallout. Not because he allowed the defect to occur, because if you shoot all of your engineers for making something with bugs in it, then you'll run out of engineers very quickly. It was the cover-up.
A/B testing with bullets, I guess.
Yeah. So for this cover-up, he was stripped of his position. He retained his rank, so he was still, in addition to his desk job, he held the rank of engineer colonel. And he was sent to the front lines as the technical deputy commander of, I forget which tank brigade it was. So despite causing very measurable harm, both in financial harm, human lives lost, right, time lost getting this vehicle into production, he was fired from his job, rightfully so, but he was just sent to active service as an officer, according to his specialization. He wasn't just given a rifle and pointed towards Berlin. He did die in battle pretty quickly. but he very much had a chance of kind of just spending the war on the front lines and coming home, as a war hero rather than a disgraced engineer.
I could also imagine there might be some merit to giving him a couple of months on the front lines with the tank unit to just have a look at what's actually required. If he had survived and come back, he probably would have gained some valuable insight, I would have thought.
It's possible. There have been examples. For example, Tsiganov. He's known for his very interesting BT tank modifications. His designs weren't very good. He was sent to teach, I forget, some academy somewhere. But again, he wasn't executed. He was just kind of shunted off to the side. When the war broke out, he went to fight in the front lines. And there's a couple more designs that come out of him. I'm not sure if you've seen the T-34 with the concrete block armor.
That sounds fascinating.
Yeah. It was kind of like a blade of armor with concrete blocks, and if the block got smashed, then you can just put up a new block, and very resistant against APCR, so tungsten core penetrators, very resistant against heat. Small problem, each concrete block weighed between 3 and 6 tons, and so if you have lifting equipment, yeah, you can put that on a T-34, but the whole point of this system was that you should be able to essentially up armor your tanks whenever you had concrete. So two samples were built, fully equipped, sent to the proving grounds, and the proving grounds engineers went, "What in God's name is this?" And they never even bothered testing them. So, unfortunately, frontline experience doesn't always result in the best designs, but still, they at least took the photos and kind of did a technical description of it. So we know what happened that survived. This guy also died in combat.
Anyway, getting back to Hetzer, one of the things, Hetzer and SU-76, one of the things that when we did the Hetzer episode, was struck by was how industrial facilities that can handle a 40-ton vehicle are quite few and relatively easily targeted, whereas there are a much greater number of facilities that can handle a 10-ton vehicle, which, even if there are deficiencies in the vehicle, still gives it some merit all of its own that you can be diversifying your production. I guess, how did they, in your book, without wanting to give away too much of the book, how did they go when they came up against each other directly, where basically they were in terrain that only lighter vehicles could get to anyway?
So the terrain around Lake Balaton, it was quite snowy in the winter, but even in the winter, there were the 3 relief operations to break the siege of Budapest, Conrad 1, 2, and 3. There was a lot of difficulty using tanks in those operations, particularly because the terrain, even when everything was frozen, was not very good for tanks. The best tank country is between Lakes Balaton and Valence, which you had to kind of going around the lake to get to Budapest was not. It would take too long, it would use too much fuel. The Germans didn't want to do it. They had no choice at this point. This was the only good tank country. So whether you're using a Hetzer or a King Tiger, really you had to go through around this point. I don't think there's any part of the front line where you only had to use lighter vehicles because only lighter vehicles could get through. Now, the Battle of Lake Balaton is often, people just focus on that space between Lakes Valence and Balaton. There were actually 3 main axes of attack. One was that one was between the Drava River and Lake Balaton in the south. And that was kind of a secondary direction. There were no Tigers, King Tigers, Panthers. All the Germans had were Stugs and Hetzers, and the Soviets had two SPG regiments. One regiment had no SPGs; they only had T-34 tanks. I don't know how that happened, but it was this kind of face-off of. It was light and medium armor, not because of the terrain, but because this was just a secondary direction. It wasn't considered as important. The third direction, which doesn't make it into the book because there weren't any Hetzers or SU-76s there, is Army Group E against the First Bulgarian and Third Yugoslavian armies. The Germans, they don't really get very far there, and there are no AFVs that I wanted to talk about, so I didn't really cover it in the book. But it's important to remember that the Eastern Front, it wasn't just the USSR versus Germany. You also had allies on both sides. In this case, the Bulgarians and Yugoslavs fighting with the Red Army, and the Hungarians fighting with the Germans.
But how did we go when the Hetzers and the 76s did come into contact?
So in theory, the front armor of the Hetzer was completely impervious to that of the Su-76. In praxis, there is a photo from that battle of a Hetzer with a big 76mm hole in the front armor. So the quality of the plate, there's a lot of studies, period reports even, about whose armor is better. You can see claims that Czech armor was not as good as German armor. You can see British studies saying that German armor is about on par with Czech armor. I haven't conclusively been able to say, this is better than that. But by the end of the war, German armor has been declining in quality kind of across the board. So 70 millimeters of front armor, particularly the cast armor of the gun mantlet, does not really offer the full protection that it otherwise would have. So at close range, with a lucky shot, the Su-76 is able to penetrate the front. And as you mentioned, the Hetzer is essentially blind. So it's possible for an Su-76 to spot its target first, hit it from the side. The side armor of the Hetzer is quite thin. You can penetrate it with the 76mm gun, even at a relatively sharp angle. So unless the Hetzer can present its front armor and only its front armor to the Su-76, then it could still be penetrated in return at quite a long range.
Yeah, I mean, the Hetzer was, in my study of it, the most effective when it could line up a specific, down a road or at a crossroad, and have its gun sights on that position, so that it had decent visibility of a very small area and wait for the enemy to come to it. But in a war of maneuver, then you lose that advantage, and the command and control gets very hard, doesn't it?
Yep. The name gets translated as like punter or trapper, or in lots of different ways. The German Tank Museum actually has a whole video about, what is Hetzung. Hetzung is a exhaustion hunting, essentially. It's when you have your hunting dogs, the Hetzers, but their job isn't to attack the bear or whatever you're hunting. It's not to kill it in direct confrontation. It's you don't let it rest. You don't let it sleep. You sort of keep pushing and pushing and pushing and pushing until it collapses from exhaustion. And I think that's a really good name for the Hetzer, since the Hetzer, like you said, its goal is not to go up against enemy tanks in a one-on-one face-to-face fight. Its goal is to sit, in an ambush. You see the enemy, you shoot the enemy, and you run away. So thick front armor would let you bounce a couple of follow-up shots, but ideally you would just back out and scoot.
Which is where the commander facing backwards is actually a bonus.
Yeah, there are a lot of other design decisions that I can sort of understand. That one I cannot. Very strange layout of the vision devices.
Right, Rob, any other questions from you?
The open topness of the SU-76M, I mean, it makes them more susceptible to overhead bursts and so forth. But the benefits of the visibility, even if they're Russians, they should be able to deal with the cold. But it seems like especially as their role is for artillery support rather than anti-tank as a tank destroyer. So it seems like a much better design decision. Plus, you don't have all the issues of a great big gun blowing off in a enclosed compartment. Your thoughts on why if there was any improvements they could have had with having a roof on them, or whether or not they should have been fully enclosed or anything like that?
So the roof is a very interesting story. The SU-76, the original design, started out in production without a roof. The third production series had a roof, and then it got taken out of production because of this transmission issue. The SU-76M then went into production without a roof because the primary goal was reliability, and to improve reliability as much as possible, you need to decrease weight, and the roof is extra weight. That's why the back is so short and the sides are cut down, is just to save as much weight as possible. Now, as you can imagine, the crews themselves weren't particularly thrilled with that, and you can actually see some photos of sheet metal roofs. One of the best things you can do is find a knocked out Panzer IV, because then you can take its shorts and armor and just put it on top. This increased the weight of the vehicle. This improved, degraded its lifespan a little bit. Put more strain on the engine and the suspension. In 1944, there was an actual study of, okay, everybody seems to want a roof. How do we put a roof on this? Unfortunately, whenever this happened, the end users don't want to lose anything, and all they want to do is gain. In this case, what they didn't want to lose was ventilation and vision. And it's really hard to beat unrestrained vision. So there was a project to put a roof on top. It had rotating Mark IV periscope. They had a version with a commander's cupola. They tried a lot of different things. It's impossible to match just being able to stick your head out and look around. Even the best vision device can only be as good as the Mark I eyeball. So the roof never really took off. Ventilation was also an issue. I mean, you can put an extractor fan, but there were certain fire missions, right? You want to just be slamming ammo in that gun and firing as quickly as possible. And in ideal conditions, the ZIS-3 can put out 20 rounds per minute. So you're firing a shot off every 3 seconds. Your loader won't be able to keep that up for long, but you can keep it up long enough that your whole crew chokes on gases. And that's where really having an open roof, that it really helps. The end result, the SU-76 that went into production in 1945, it had improved protection from the rear and the sides. So the ones, if you've ever been to the Bovington Tank Museum, they have one there from the Korean War. It has that kind of improved protection. But even at the very end, no roof. The best you could hope for is a tarp to save you from rain.
Yeah, I mean, one of the things I like, and obviously the Soviets liked as well about Su-76, was that it was sort of a multi-role utility in a way, in that it could be in a divisional artillery role, or it could be in a tank destroyer role as needed. But if you just have lots of them, then you've just got more, and then you adapt them as the circumstances demand.
Yep. The Red Army really didn't see a distinction between self-propelled guns and tank destroyers. Even the SU-100, the ISU-122, they were developed ground up as tank destroyers. Their whole point was to be able to destroy enemy heavy tanks. Both of these vehicles were organized into SPG regiments. So not tank destroyer regiments, SPG regiments. and their gunners would train in SPG missions like in direct fire. One of the reasons why the ISU-122 was quite liked is not because it could destroy tanks, but because it could destroy barricades. So very popular in Berlin. The SU-76, unfortunately, because of the lack of roof in Berlin and in Vienna, they took heavy losses due to attack from above. In this case, not having a roof, I mean, even if you did have a roof and somebody's checking Molotov cocktails down at you, you're not going to have a great time. The ability to cooperate with infantry, the fact that you're always accompanied by infantry, unlike a tank might not have any infantry assigned to support it, or I mean, it should, but sometimes it doesn't. That was kind of your only saving grace is you have some riflemen watching your back and watching the roof.
Yeah, no, I agree. SU-76 wasn't the best for urban warfare, but I think that was accepted by its, if not its designers, at least by the people who were paying for it.
Yeah, I mean, tanks in urban environments are always vulnerable. That's why I like the name of the urban survival kit on the Abrams tank,
Tusk,
where they very much agree is what we're going for is not like kill everyone, be the best, be invulnerable is just survival. Because
don't drive into a basement. Don't drive through a building and fall into a basement.
Yeah. Ramming something with a tank is a skill. You can't just drive a tank into something and expect it to come out unharmed just because it's big and heavy.
All right. Peter, can you tell people where they can get your book?
Sure. My book is available directly from Osprey's website. It is available on Amazon. It is available wherever fine books are sold. So if you have a local bookshop, come on, drop down there and see if they have any other Osprey titles there. You'll be able to buy it.
Great. And of course, your Tank Archives is what social media are you on these days?
Yep. So tankarchives.com is my primary website. I have a YouTube channel, which you should be able to get a link below. I am on Facebook. I am on Blue Sky. I am on X. Yeah, and I mean, I got an email, tankarchives@gmail.com. If all else fails, you can find me there.
Nice one. Okay, Peter, thank you so much for your time, and I hope the book goes really well. I need to get myself a copy, but all right. Thank you.
All right. Thanks for having me.
Take care.